Emma and Mark had been married for over a decade, building a life that seemed picturesque to those around them. They had a charming home, successful careers, and a bright, talented teenage daughter, Sophie. On the surface, everything seemed perfect, but beneath the facade, their relationship had become strained. The spark that once brought them together had dimmed, replaced by routine and distant conversations. Emma often felt neglected as Mark buried himself in work, trying to provide for their family. His late nights and exhaustion left little time for intimacy or connection. She tried to communicate her feelings, but their discussions often ended in frustration or avoidance. It wasn't long before Emma found herself yearning for attention and excitement. One afternoon, while attending a yoga class, Emma met Daniel, a charismatic and easygoing man who radiated charm. They struck up a conversation that flowed effortlessly, and over the following weeks, their casual chats became more frequent. Daniel's attentive nature and humor were a stark contrast to the aloofness she experienced at home. He noticed things about her: her smile, the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her interests, things Mark seemed to overlook. Emma tried to resist her growing feelings for Daniel, telling herself it was harmless. But one evening, after a chance encounter at a coffee shop, they ended up sharing a bottle of wine at his place. The boundaries blurred, and they gave in to the passion they had both been suppressing. The thrill was intoxicating, filling the void Emma had felt for so long. Unbeknownst to Emma, Sophie had started to pick up on the subtle changes in her mother's behavior. The extra care she took with her appearance, the secretive smiles when checking her phone, it all felt out of character. Sophie, curious and a little suspicious, decided to follow Emma one day after she left the house claiming to meet a friend. To her shock, she saw her mother enter Daniel's apartment. Conflicted, Sophie didn't confront Emma immediately. Instead, she confided in her best friend, Emily, who advised her to gather her thoughts before doing anything rash. Sophie struggled with the weight of her discovery, torn between loyalty to her father and understanding the complexity of adult relationships. Meanwhile, Emma's affair continued, and the secrecy only heightened the allure. But guilt began to creep in, especially when Mark, unaware of the betrayal, surprised her with a weekend getaway to reignite their marriage. Emma realized she was standing at a crossroads. As the weekend approached, Sophie decided she couldn't keep the secret any longer. During a quiet moment with her mother, she confronted Emma about what she had seen. Emma was stunned and struggled to find words, but Sophie's tears and disappointment hit her harder than any accusation. That evening, Emma sat down with Mark, confessing everything. The fallout was painful and raw, but it was also a turning point. They agreed to attend counseling to see if their marriage could be salvaged. Emma ended her affair with Daniel, realizing the temporary thrill wasn't worth the damage it had caused her family. For Sophie, the ordeal was a harsh lesson in the complexities of love and forgiveness. Watching her parents navigate the aftermath taught her that relationships are messy, but honesty and effort are essential in healing. Over time, the family began to rebuild. Those scars remained as reminders of the fragile line between temptation and loyalty. As weeks turned into months, Emma and Mark attended counseling sessions regularly. The therapist helped them unpack years of unspoken frustrations and misunderstandings. For Mark, it became clear that his dedication to providing financial security had caused him to neglect the emotional needs of his family. Emma, on the other hand, began to understand how her own feelings of loneliness and neglect had led her down a destructive path. Sophie struggled to process her emotions during this time. Seeing her parents trying to repair their marriage was both a relief and a source of confusion. Part of her was angry with her mother for betraying her father and the family, but another part of her sympathized with Emma's loneliness. Sophie found herself grappling with the complexities of adulthood, learning that even those she admired could make mistakes. One evening, Sophie decided to speak openly with her parents. She admitted how deeply hurt she had been by the betrayal, but also expressed her hope for their reconciliation. Her honesty struck a chord with both Emma and Mark. They realized how their struggles had impacted their daughter, and they made a conscious effort to involve her in their journey toward healing. Family dinners became more frequent, and they began spending more quality time together. Emma also took it upon herself to rebuild her bond with Sophie. She apologized sincerely, not just for the affair, but for the hurt it had caused Sophie. They began sharing long conversations during evening walks, slowly rebuilding trust. Emma's openness about her regrets and the lessons she had learned helped Sophie see her mother as a flawed but redeemable human being. Meanwhile, Mark worked on expressing his emotions more openly. He started paying attention to the little things that made Emma happy, bringing her coffee in the morning, complimenting her efforts, and genuinely listening when she spoke. It wasn't easy, and there were still moments of tension and doubt, but they both committed to putting in the work. For Emma, letting go of Daniel was one of the hardest parts of the process. She had to confront the fact that the happiness she found in his company was a result of neglecting her own issues and projecting her desires onto him. She channeled her energy into self-reflection, journaling, and finding fulfillment in healthier ways, such as pursuing hobbies and deepening her friendships. Months later, the family took a vacation together, a trip to the mountains that had been Sophie's idea. They hiked, shared stories around a campfire, and even laughed in a way they hadn't in years. It was far from perfect, but it felt like a step forward. The experience didn't erase the pain of what had happened, but it created a new foundation. Emma and Mark learned that love wasn't just about passion or romance. It was about commitment, resilience, and the willingness to fight for each other even in the darkest times. Sophie, now wiser and more empathetic, carried those lessons into her own relationships, determined to approach them with honesty and care. As time passed, the scars of the past became part of their story, a reminder of how fragile and precious trust can be, and how even broken bonds can be mended with effort, understanding, and love. Years went by, and the family's life gradually settled into a new normal. Though the memory of the affair lingered, it became less of a defining moment and more of a chapter that marked their resilience. Emma and Mark continued to grow as individuals and as a couple, rediscovering what had drawn them together in the first place. They still attended therapy occasionally, viewing it not as a necessity, but as a tool to keep their relationship healthy. For Sophie, the experience had a profound impact on her perspective. Now in her early 20s and attending college, she often reflected on those tumultuous months. They had taught her the importance of communication, forgiveness, and self-awareness. Sophie's own relationships were far from perfect, but she was more conscious of the choices she made and the values she wanted to uphold. One summer, Sophie returned home for a break. The house felt warmer, more inviting than it had in years. Emma had taken up gardening, and Mark had discovered a love for cooking. The couple seemed happier, their laughter filling the house in a way that reminded Sophie of her childhood. Watching her parents joke and tease each other over dinner, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Their relationship wasn't perfect. No relationship was, but it was real and evolving. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sophie decided to ask her mother something that had been on her mind. "Mom," Sophie began hesitantly, "do you ever regret what happened? I mean, everything that came from it." Emma paused, the question catching her off guard. She took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon. "I regret the pain I caused," she admitted. "I regret breaking your dad's trust and the hurt it brought to you. But I also think it forced us all to confront things we've been avoiding for years. It made me realize how much I needed to change, not just as a wife, but as a person." Sophie nodded, absorbing her mother's words. "I guess it's weird to say, but I've learned a lot from it too, about what love really means." Emma turned to her daughter, her eyes soft with affection. "Love is complicated, Sophie. It's not always pretty or easy, but it's worth fighting for, even when it feels like you've lost your way." Sophie smiled, comforted by the honesty in her mother's voice. The conversation brought them closer, strengthening the bond that had been rebuilt piece by piece over the years. As Sophie prepared to return to college, Emma and Mark stood together at the door, waving her off. Sophie glanced back, seeing her parents standing side by side, their hands brushing lightly. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke volumes. It wasn't about perfection. It was about persistence, the willingness to try again, to choose each other even after the hardest trials. Sophie drove away, carrying with her a profound sense of hope. Her family's journey wasn't just a story of betrayal. It was a testament to growth, forgiveness, and the enduring power of love. As Sophie drove back to college, her thoughts lingered on her parents and everything they had been through. Their journey, though painful, had taught her more about resilience than any lecture or book ever could. It made her realize that people aren't defined by their mistakes, but by their efforts to make things right. Meanwhile, back at home, Emma and Mark continued to nurture their renewed relationship. They found joy in the little things, weekend breakfasts, evening walks, and even quiet moments of reading side by side. There were still days when the past crept into their minds, but instead of letting it fester, they talked openly about their feelings. Honesty had become the cornerstone of their marriage, a lesson they wished they had learned earlier. Emma also started volunteering at a local community center, helping women navigate life's challenges. Sharing her story with others, without the details but with heartfelt honesty, felt cathartic. She found solace in knowing her experiences could inspire others to seek help and make better choices. Mark, on the other hand, used his newfound cooking passion to bring people together. He began hosting small dinner parties for friends and neighbors, turning their home into a place of warmth and connection. Each gathering reminded him of how important it was to prioritize relationships over work. Sophie, now in her final year of college, found herself applying her parents' lessons to her own life. She had started dating someone new, a kind, thoughtful guy named Ethan. Unlike her previous relationships, Sophie approached this one with an open heart and clear communication. She didn't shy away from discussing her fears or setting boundaries. To her surprise, Ethan responded with the same level of honesty, creating a bond that felt strong and genuine. One weekend, Sophie invited Ethan to visit her parents. Nervous about introducing him, she was comforted by the warm welcome he received. Over dinner, Mark shared funny anecdotes, and Emma asked Ethan about his goals and passions. It felt like a glimpse into the life Sophie had always hoped for, a family that, despite its imperfections, was grounded in love and understanding. After Ethan left, Sophie sat with her parents in the living room, reflecting on how far they had all come. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "I used to think what happened to us would break us forever. But now, I see it as something that shaped us. It made us stronger." Mark reached for Emma's hand, giving it a gentle squeeze. "Life isn't about avoiding mistakes," he said, looking at his daughter. "It's about learning from them and growing together." Emma nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "We're not perfect, Sophie, but we'll always fight to be better, for ourselves and for you." Sophie smiled, feeling a deep sense of pride in her family. They had faced a storm and come out stronger, proving that even in the face of betrayal and pain, love and forgiveness could prevail. It wasn't the life they had envisioned, but it was theirs, and it was beautiful in its own imperfect way.